let's get into it. Coach Colin news. This is actually very, very interesting. Mitch McConnell, you know, the guy who froze up a couple of times, just gave you the old, just froze. Well, he's out of that phase, and he's talking about Ukraine aid, talking about why the delay. First off, it shows so much. The fact that the questions being asked when the border is the way it is, and you know there's drug issues throughout the entire country, the question that the press really wants to know is why the delay in the Ukraine aid? Well, Mitch McConnell obviously answers, and his answer is very ridiculous in my opinion. He blames Tucker Carlson and Trump for the delay in aid. I got 2 clips of him saying that, and then I got 2 clips of Tucker Carlson talking about America first, you know, and that's his whole thing. And for some reason, Mitch McConnell and probably some other people think that he has some malicious intent towards them and Ukraine when he talks about serving the people of America first. Very interesting. So I'll play those 2 clips after I play the Mitch McConnell clips. Let's get into it.
What took so long to get some of these other 8 Republicans persuaded to your position here? Was it the overall nature of this bill and what was lost in that time period for Ukraine?
Well, that's a good question. You already know the answer. I think the demonization of Ukraine began by Tucker Carlson, who, in my opinion, ended up where he should have been all along, which is interviewing Vladimir Putin. And so he had an enormous audience, which convinced a lot of rank-and-file Republicans that maybe this was a mistake. I think the former president had sort of mixed views on it. We all felt that the border was a complete disaster, myself included. And Chad, you remember covering the phases we went through. First, there was an effort to make law, which requires you to deal with Democrats. And then a number of our members thought it wasn't good enough. And then our nominee for president didn't seem to want us to do anything at all. That took months to work our way through it. So we ended up doing the supplemental that was originally proposed, which dealt with not all problems. It didn't solve the border problem, but certainly addressed the growing threats at the moment.
Thanks for watching.
Be quiet, propagandist. Anyway, anyway, what's funny about that is, you know, he's talking about the Ukraine and the delay, and you know he's basically just passing the blame everywhere but him. You're like, yo, law, and then you got to deal with Democrats, and you know what that's like. And then Tucker, he has a show and he's talking, and that's a problem. And Trump didn't want to do anything, and I know I'm the person who can just get things done, but I mean, if Tucker has a show, what am I supposed to do? Can we get some censorship here? Imagine he talked that fast. Oh, it'd be a different world. But it's funny that near the end of what he was saying just now, he was talking about how, you know, it didn't solve all the problems, but it's like, well, then if you know the border is a disaster, like he was saying, if you're aware of that and you know that needs to be fixed, then why would your efforts or your gaze go anywhere but towards the border? So it's like, I can't get border stuff done right now, but I can get the Ukraine stuff done right now. Shouldn't it just be, and again, this is the whole thing. This is what, if Tucker's done anything, he's just made statements about being America first. And he hasn't even made the statement about other politicians being America first. He's just made the statement about himself being for America, because that's constantly been put into question over the past, I would say, 6 months, 7 months. So it's just so ridiculous that if you can get anything done, and think about how many things need to be done throughout America. If you could get anything done, you're like, I got to get that Ukraine thing done. It's really interesting. I can't wait to play one of the clips I have of Tucker, because he's giving a speech. It's his most recent speech. And he gets to a point where he's talking about politicians, and he's talking about how they are now and the thing that they really need in order to rule, for lack of a better word, and that is kind of how they feel about things, in order to rule properly, to govern properly, to deal with the country as they should. And it is something that they're missing, you know. Let's get into the second clip right now. This is Mitch again talking to somebody else. He's going on a little bit of a tour, just blaming Tucker and Trump for all the issues right now.
Should Mr. Trump, as candidate, as representative of your party, go and see Ukraine for himself?
I'm not going to give him any advice. I'm focusing on turning the Senate Republicans into the majority here and focusing on advocating, as I think I successfully did this very week, for moving away from the isolationist movement that began with Tucker Carlson.
It began with Tucker Carlson?
It did. He had a huge audience among rank and file Republicans, and I think it was very destructive, very impactful on regular Republican voters, and created a big problem.
Because he mimicked Republican propaganda and amplified it, and then that's been repeated on the House floor, as the House Intel chairman
Well,
said?
I certainly disagreed with him, and he certainly ended up where he should have been all along, interviewing Vladimir Putin.
Will you fact check Donald Trump when he says these things? Because he has also repeated some of these
I'm not
lines.
going to give any advice to our candidate in the presidential election. What I'm focusing on is turning the Senate into a majority Republican.
Should Mr.
This is amazing. She said Republican propaganda. I didn't even watch this clip before I showed it to you guys. The fact that they're talking about the isolationist movement, which is actually just America first. They're kind of, sterilizing or demonizing the America First movement of people who it's not even a movement. It's a logical step. It's logic. It's common sense to want to deal with your own nation and their problems first, and then deal with everything else. And if you know things are going bad, inflation, and the economy, and the border, and this and that, you don't send $180 billion to another place. You take that money and you put it into the country. Literally common sense, but they've branded that as the isolationist movement. And, if I had to get into what that is, isolationist means you shouldn't involve yourself in all these wars and proxies and this and that. And again, really not a movement. It's the American people kind of making their voices heard. There's a lot of people, working class, middle class, which is disappearing. So I'll just say working class, lower class. They want their problems dealt with first. Obviously. Who out of all the people voting, unless you are super woke, unless you are Ukrainian yourself, unless you are from Israel, Jewish, who is really going to want money sent? Because I say Jewish because, Israel and Ukraine are the two main things. There's also some things going on, money getting sent to Asia as well, but it's lower numbers. I think it's no more than 6 billion, something like that, which is wild that I'm saying that's a low number. But unless you're actually in those groups, or you're just trying to virtue signal, or you're just trying to do anything opposite of what Trump says or what a Republican says, who wants a bunch of money sent elsewhere while things are decaying all around them? And then the question of, should Donald Trump go see Ukraine for himself? No. Why not go see Kensington, Philadelphia? Why not check out that place? It's a war zone. Make sure you wear shoes that can't be penetrated because there's syringes everywhere. It's crazy what you can see there. Forget about visit the tent encampments that are all over New York, that are all over Chicago, the schools that have been cleared out, or maybe just one or two, although I'm saying that like That's not huge. 1 or 2 in Chicago that have been cleared out. Check out those places. Again, I don't understand. Well, you know what? I was going to say I don't understand why she's putting this focus elsewhere other than America, but I do understand. You know, this is mainstream media, and they're trying to, whoever's willing to watch this, they're trying to give them the perspective that that anything in regards to focusing on America is an isolationist movement, is Republican propaganda, and you are a good person if you put your focus elsewhere, allow your tax dollars to be sent elsewhere, and nothing is done for you as your situation in terms of the economy. And, you know, if you're around massive amounts of illegal immigrants that are just coming in, everything just gets worse. And they're trying to convince people that that's actually better. And they're blaming Tucker Carlson. I didn't see that coming. I understand Trump. You know, everybody blames Trump. You know, Biden said that his cousin or his uncle, was eaten by cannibals. And the press secretary was like, well, do you know what Trump said? Yeah, this is actually about Trump. You're missing the point. Like, I'm not even making that up. That sounds like it's made up. I'm not making that up. So they always blame Trump. But to see that they're blaming Tucker Carlson, that really is odd to me. You know, and he's blaming it on his show. And again, Tucker Carlson did not infect a bunch of minds with this outlook. He's saying what millions of people actually are feeling. There are millions of people in New York who want to see their situations dealt with who don't even know who Tucker Carlson is. Do you know how many people want to see their tax dollars going to their communities, building up their communities, stopping the erosion that's going on, that don't even know who Tucker Carlson is? To just make it like, this is just Tucker Carlson. That's all this is. So out of touch. And again, I can't wait to play that last clip because that's exactly what it is. Just so out of touch. But here's another example of this Tucker Carlson just being very America first. I mean, when Mike Johnson first took position as Speaker of the House, the first thing he did was talk about support of Israel. He didn't even address the American people. He didn't even address the citizens who he is supposed to be looking after. He addressed Israel right away. And Tucker Carlson said this.
He's a nice guy, and I'm not against him, but I'm just saying, like, if you think the welfare of another country is the most important thing for you as one of the leaders of our country, third in line to the presidency, you have lost the thread, son, because it's not. Nothing is more important for the leaders of our country than our country and how its 350 million people are doing. So I was enraged by that. And people were like, oh, are you for Hamas? Of course I'm not for Hamas at all. I'm for America, actually. I shouldn't even have to answer that question. Yeah. Are you for Israel or Hamas? I mean, obviously I'm for Israel over Hamas, but that's irrelevant. I'm for America. And no one even asked that.
So true. So true. And, you know, he said this months ago. Good call on him in regards to Mike Johnson, because we can see where he's been going with things lately. I'm actually really surprised. I thought he was really good because he had that Trump endorsement. Trump liked him a lot. So I was kind of like, okay, you know, maybe he's one of the guys. But no, he's not one of the guys. He's like Nikki Haley. You know how Nikki Haley is? It's like, she's a Republican, but, you know, she's not. I think that's what Mike Johnson is. Pretty sure. Now, what I'm going to play for you, again, it's a Tucker Carlson speech, but he's just talking about politicians of today and what they really need to be proper, to be in their positions and do it properly and do it right for America. Because in regards to Ukraine would look over at American politicians and be like, they're doing a great job. Israel would be like, they're doing a fantastic job. But if you're from New York, and you're watching all these guys lined up and there's people everywhere and they're trying to sell you things and they're breaking into your cars and this and that, you don't feel like anybody cares about you. And you know what? That's a majority of the people in America. They don't feel like, who do you know anybody that feels like politicians care about them? actually care about them? Do you even know anybody that feels like most politicians love the country? Here, let's get into this.
Anyway, that's my opinion. But one thing he did write a lot about was the need to have an impressive ruling class. And he was often called a populist. And of course, he went after the trusts, including a trust that my relatives controlled, the Sugar Trust, the Havemeyer Sugar Trust, which he destroyed. But he was a product of that same class. He was a ruling class guy. And that's why he was an effective critique of that class, because he knew them. He wasn't sort of pressed against the glass hoping to be one of them. He was born one of them in New York City. I think on East 30th Street, if I'm correct. But anyway, the point is, he knew the people he was talking about, and he knew how unworthy they were of leadership of a country this great. And that's why his criticism stung. That's why his reforms worked, because he knew what he was talking about. He wasn't trying to get rich. He was rich. They didn't have anything that he wanted. He had social status and he had money. And so he cared about the country, he cared about nature, he loved animals. And as decent people do, he loved children, he had a ton of them. And he loved the nation enough to call out the bad actors in the ruling class, not because he was against ruling classes. He was a man of deep learning. The book that he wrote at Harvard, The Naval War of 1812, the 2 volumes, is still in print. And he wrote it, it's still assigned to the Naval Academy, or was a couple of years ago. He wrote it because he was bored, because Harvard wasn't hard enough for him. That's how intense his intellectual energy was. He wrote like 50 letters a day, and he read all the time. While exercising, he read. And one of the things he learned from his deep reading in history was that the ruling class, the hierarchy, is a feature of human nature, as it is in the animal world. There's one head dog in a house. And if there's any confusion about who the dog is who's in charge, the dogs will kill each other until a leader is chosen. It's just a feature that we didn't create, and it will never change. So populism as an idea is stupid. You're not going to have a flat society. You're always going to have a hierarchical society. What you're looking for is a ruling class that is wise, who understand their own limits, who know that they're not God, and who treat the people beneath them fairly and with love, who care about the people they lead. Love is the key. And I'm not a liberal, hardly. I already said I want to execute litterers, so you know I'm not a liberal. But I'm going to use liberal language when I say love is the key. You have to love the people you're in charge of, whether it's your children or your troops if you're an officer, whether it's your employees if you're an employer, or whether it's your voters and citizens if you're a political leader. And if you don't love them, you will hurt them. It's really, really simple. Beneficence has to be at the heart of your motive. And if it's not, you're a bad leader. And Roosevelt understood that and said that much more articulately than I am now doing. And we don't have that. And that's what drives me crazy. It's not a question of Biden versus Trump. I mean, it is, strictly speaking, that question. And I have obvious preferences, which I've expressed many times. I had dinner with Trump last night. But it's much bigger than that. It's the people who've reaped the most benefits from the system, A, don't believe in the system, and don't love the people who made those benefits possible, the rest of the citizenry. They don't. And I live in one of those towns, and I've seen it. They don't care at all. If everybody in the town I lived in died of a fentanyl OD, there'd be no story in the New York Times except as like a curiosity. Entire main town dies. No one cares. You have to care. That's why you're a good parent, not because you're super smart or like unusually selfless. You're not Mother Teresa. You're just like a goofy dad like the rest. You know, we're all just goofy dads, like making dumb mistakes with our kids. But if we love them, they'll turn out okay. That's all that matters is your motive. And that's why everybody can be a pretty decent parent. Everybody, even the super dumb people. You're like, oh, that person shouldn't have kids. I think they should, actually. I think they should. Because they can do it. All they need is to love their children, and they'll get it right enough. The dumb people will probably make more mistakes because they're dumb. But it'll still be okay if they love their kids. And it's exactly the same with our leaders. Everyone's like, our leaders are so unimpressive. Yeah, well, if you only knew, I know them. Are you joking? You wouldn't hire them to run your kid's birthday party. They're losers. But they'd still be okay. They'd still be good enough. Maybe not the best we could get, but that's all right. You're not always going to get the best. They would be okay if they loved the people who live here. And so that was basically that's just my message. Like, to the extent I have a message, it's that. It's like, why does a place like Russia run by Vladimir Putin, who I'm not endorsing? I don't want to live in Russia. I would if I wanted to, but I don't. I don't want to. I have no connection. I'm not Russian. I'm American. I just want that here. I don't want their system. I don't want their language. Their food is excellent, I will say that. But I do want to live in a place that's a lot prettier. And the question it evoked in me was, why isn't my country, and its cities in particular, that pretty? Like, what's the answer? Oh, shut up. No, how about no? I'm not going to shut up because I'm 54 and my kids are grown and I don't have to. And now
that pretty much sums up the message, you know? The thing that the politicians need is some kind of love, some kind of caring. And it just doesn't seem that way. When you see Gavin Newsom talking to a crowd or in an interview talking about how he's going to fix homelessness, he doesn't seem like he actually cares. When you see Kamala Harris talking about what she plans on doing, it doesn't seem like she cares. The press secretary, like, you can just work down the line, go through all of them. They just don't seem like they care all that much. And then when you're watching that and you're like, I'm not sure if these people care. And then you see them say, okay, we got to handle this right away for the country and for democracy. And you're like, I'm listening. They're like, we got to put $95 billion. And you're like, yep, I know what you're going to say. And they're like, into Israel, Ukraine, and some Pacific Asian area, okay? We got to get this done. Okay, it's for democracy. You're like, oh, that's not what I thought you were going to say. I thought you cared. I thought you really cared. You know, that there's a woman, a video that I covered. She was at a city council meeting talking to this super woke mayor that they have there because he wanted to put another 70 million into the migrant crisis going on. And he had already taken 50, way more money. But in this situation, he took 51 million from an opioid fund that was for the people of Chicago. He took that and he put that towards the immigrants, you know? And she was talking about how so many people are ODing and there's so many people on drugs, and, you know, the cartel is part of it. And like, and she says to the mayor, she goes, you have to see this. You live, she was talking about like their area. She's like, you live on the West Side. She's like, how do you not see it? And that's a great question. All of these politicians have the internet, they have kids, they have grandkids, they have to drive around, they have cars. Like, how do they not see it? And that's the thing. They do. You think Gavin Newsom cleaned up the city when the Chinese president, emperor, whatever, came to see him. He cleaned it up, which means he knew it was there. And now that it's all back, he knows. He knows exactly what's going on. He just doesn't care. And that seems to be something that's affecting a lot of these politicians. And, you know, exactly what Tucker said, if you don't love the people that you're serving, you're going to hurt them because you're going to be indifferent about them. You're going to be like, whatever. Let's do Ukraine. Yeah, let's do Israel. You know, Biden's like, yeah, what do you think I can't handle what's going on here and two wars? You don't, he disrespected everybody. He's like, you don't understand how powerful America is. And it's like, what are you talking about? You can't be doing this. The border's open. Oh, well, we really wanted to deal with the border, but, you know, I mean, Republicans, Democrats, I don't know. It's not our fault because we just need this $60 billion and we're going to send it to Ukraine. It's like, what's going on? And yet, and I always bring this up, you know, I always talk about my biases, you know, Trump. Yet Trump was just like, it's an invasion. I'm going to take the money from the military. They have enough money. And you just kind of go, wait a second, can you do that? He's like, yeah, I can do that. I just did. That's what I'm doing. And then you look around, you're like, can Biden do that too? He could, but he won't. Because if you don't love the people that you're serving, you're just going to hurt them. You're going to allow them to be hurt. You're going to put them in situations where they could be hurt. Situations like people on the terrorist watch list are actually making their way across the border. a bunch have gotten caught. Maybe some haven't. No one knows, because there's a sea of people that have just came right through. Very interesting. So the moral of this is that if you feel like your issues should be dealt with first, you're not America first. You're actually an isolationist. Let's give it a real cutting name. You're an isolationist who is feeding into Republican propaganda. That's what you are, actually. It's incredible. And you're being brainwashed by Tucker Carlson. And maybe a little bit by me. Oh no. Oh no. This guy was trying to brainwash me into thinking that, maybe my city should get cleaned up and there shouldn't be so many drugs on the street, and maybe I shouldn't have to pay so much for everything, and I should have a higher quality of life. Oh man, well, stay away from that guy. Stay away from that guy. You know where that block button is, right? Yeah. I'm going to report him first, though. Just kidding. I'm sure there's somebody doing that somewhere, though. But yeah, that's what's happening right now. Mitch McConnell is going on a tour blaming Tucker Carlson for the delay in Ukraine aid, as if Tucker Carlson is a politician at all. So that's what's happening right now. Doesn't seem like they care about you all that much. But like I always say, handle things properly. Make sure you vote for who you need to vote for, who makes the most sense. You do it on the highest level, you do it on the local level, and you make yourself heard. That's what you should do. Anyways, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. I'm out.